Canucci Terranella again, Executive Director, the Wenatchee River Institute. Thank you so much for coming. If you were already at dinner, thank you for doing that. And if you're new to WRI, would you mind letting me know? How many of you have never been to a WRI event before? Oh, fantastic. That's great. Thank you for coming tonight. We're a nature center here in Leavenworth. Obviously, we got about 13 acres. Our mission is to connect people, communities, and the natural world, and we do that through events like this. Also with youth programs where we take our naturalists who work here, have students come, learn about all the things that David Lukas is going to talk about, some of them, not all of them. But also we take our naturalists on the road, and we go all over North Central Washington and work with students from places that are not as privileged as Leavenworth to have something like this where they can study. So that's a great thing we do. We also do community programs, Red Barn lectures like this one, nature walks, seasonal snowshoes when it's time to do that, and all sorts of things. So if you've not been here before, please go to our website, WenatcheeRiverInstitute.org, and you can find out other ways to connect with us. Lots of good stuff. You're here for Bird Fest, though. You should know that Cashmere Canyon still has space tomorrow. So if you want to do more, we got a couple of extra spots due to cancellations. And also the Moses Coulee trip has a spot. If anybody wants that, go online to that same place and you can sign up right now. Other thing that we have, having the privilege of the microphone and the voice, we always want to acknowledge the original stewards of this land, and we have a land acknowledgement I'm going to read for you now before we get started. This land acknowledgement was created alongside the Shinpei people. We're spreading the word and the message that they wish to be spread with the public. The land the Wenatchee River Institute sits on is the ancestral homelands of the Shinpei, the Pisquosa or Wenatchee people. The Shinpei, meaning people in between, had villages positioned along the Wenatchee River and surrounding areas. Their ancestral homeland extends from the Cascade Ridge through what is now known as the Wenatchee and Okanagan Valleys. The culture and economy of this Shinpei people centers on taking care of the land. They fish, hunt, gather roots and berries, basket-making materials, and medicines. The Shinpei are named within the Yakima Treaty of 1855. Language to establish the Wenatchee Reservation was never followed through, even with the needed surveying completed. Many Shinpei now live on the Colville Reservation, 150 miles northeast of Leavenworth. They were forced off their lands here, and the U.S. government moved them to this reservation. The Shinpei people are still alive today. They continue to practice their culture, harvest their traditional foods and medicines, and hold their ceremonies passed down from their ancestors. Most people won't see or notice them, but they continue to be on the land they are connected to. Their traditional language is Inham Sheen. It's an interior Salish dialect, and I can welcome you now using their language. Tilhusht. We offer this land acknowledgement as the first step to amplifying Indigenous voices and recognizing the harm done to them as a people. We stand as an ally to recognize their connection to the land and their rights to practice their culture on these sacred lands. We encourage all to learn about the Indigenous people of the place you now call home. The Wenatchee River Institute is committed to sharing this land acknowledgement and following up with other actions to educate and be respectful. Thank you. We also couldn't do this without sponsorships from many great businesses in the area. This is the key to being able to hold lots of our Red Barn events for free. Not this one, but many others. Sponsors include North Central Washington Audubon, which is a big sponsor for tonight and a partner, Cascade Auto Centers, Sleeping Lady Mountain Resort, Ludwig's German Restaurant, Leavenworth KOA, the Obertal Inn, Ryan House, South Restaurants, Leavenworth Outdoor Center, Orion Rafting, Icicle Brewing, the Munchin House, the Leavenworth Chamber of Commerce, Syndicate Smith, and Winton Manufacturing and Compost Works. So those are our sponsors. Also, Jeremy's in the back as a volunteer tonight, helping the folks back home be able to plug in and listen. Hopefully we sound good. Now I get to introduce David Lukas. So if you don't know David Lukas, you're in for a treat. He's a well-known naturalist and author. He lives in the Methow Valley. He's written 7 books and contributed to over 40 others on a tremendous range of nature topics. He's got thousands of natural history tours and guided trips, and workshops and presentations under his belt. His most recent project, which I particularly like, is a couple of weekly nature newsletters that come out and delivered to your inbox on email. You should sign up today. One of them is lucasguides.com. The other one is meadownatureNotes.com. They're both excellent. I really advise you to check them out. He's also on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube, because we all are these days. David, here he is. Take it away, man. Thank you.
Thank you so much, everyone, for coming out tonight. Is this working, Jeremy? All right, good, thank you. And thank you for coming out in support of the Wenatchee River Institute and the Bird Festival. And thank you so much for sharing your love of the natural world and birds in particular. I'm glad that we can all be here tonight. We had a fabulous trip this morning. Did you have a fabulous trip this morning? Oh, incredible day, amazing. Flowers galore, birds galore. I heard like maybe 6 species for the first time this morning. I was pretty excited. Let's see, is that the right slide? There you go. So as you mentioned in your introduction, I'll just say a little bit about myself too. So my name is David Lukas. I have been working as a freelance naturalist my whole life. I actually started when I was 5 years old, memorizing pictures and field guides. I memorized all of the pictures, and then when I could read, I memorized the texts and field guides. And I'm not gonna tell you how old I am now, but I have been doing it my entire life. Every single night, basically till midnight, I am studying field guides every day. And over the course of a lifetime, that has built up just an amazing body of knowledge. I also weave that together with out hiking every day, taking notes, coming up with questions. I have an immense natural history library at home, and I basically live in my library. I'm researching, looking things up, and then turning what I learn and the questions I have into stories that I share in the books that you mentioned. I share now in my weekly newsletters every week, just incredible nature stories and insights. And I share them in classes and workshops and presentations like this. And tonight we're gonna talk about a really cool topic, bird bones and skeletons. And as I was kind of reviewing this talk last night, I realized it's not just so much about bird bones and skeletons. We're actually going to talk about a lot of really interesting features of birds that all make the birds so magical to us, all unique features that make them work. And the foundation, of course, underneath all of these feathers is the bones and skeletons. And before I get started in the talk, I just want to mention that the diagrams from this talk are coming from 2 fabulous books that I've used my entire life as kind of like my cornerstone, as my reference books. If you don't know these books, these are incredible books. And as you'll see in the presentation, the diagrams are fantastic. They're great teaching tools. They're really clear. The text, especially the one on the left, which is a big, heavy book, some of you may know of it, is really easy to read. It's really clear. So a lot of diagrams from these, and then I am pulling images from the internet. These are not my pictures. These are just, I'm using them as tools because this is an educational event so we can all learn together. So just by way of introduction, anyone know how many birds there are in the world? How many species? Oh. I would say about 10,000, but 11,000 now. It's always changing. There's about 10,000, let's say, 10,000 species of birds in the world. And what's remarkable about them is that they all have basically the same size and shape, right? So basically, not all of them, but the vast majority of birds in the world are, say, smaller than a football and have this streamlined shape. So why is that? Flight. The physical demands of flight constrain them to this. They arrived on this design about 15 million years ago, and they haven't changed it since. Because once you find that perfect aerodynamic shape, you cannot tinker with this without ruining the dynamics of flight. You have to stay with this. Basically, if you take a water droplet, it assumes a shape, and you cannot change the shape of the water droplet. It's always the same, right? Same exact thing for birds, is they've all kind of arranged on the same basic shape. And I mention this because it's interesting to compare them with other groups of animals in the world. So, mammals, for instance. So I just picked 3 random mammals, a little shrew, a giraffe, and a whale. Look how different they are in terms of their shape and the scale of their size. It's just an incredible diversity of mammals, right? But we're talking about flight. So what other animals fly? Well, fish are basically flying in water as a different medium. And even with fish, look at just 3 random examples of how different fish can be in terms of design and the scale of their size, right? Just incredible variation. So when we look at this American robin and realize that the vast majority of birds in the world are basically this size and shape, it shows you how unique that is, that birds are really constrained to this level right here. So here's a problem that comes from that. So if you have 10,000, just say, 10,000 species of birds in the world, they're all basically the same size and shape. How do birds differentiate each other and evolve into different niches? What are ways that you can vary and identify yourself as different without adding weight? There's like 3 main ways that I can think of. Color.
Beaks, size and shape.
Yes, and song. Song and vocalizations, right? So color, songs, vocalizations, and beaks, right? And beaks weigh almost nothing, which frees you up to play with all kinds of forms and functions for beaks. So for example, this is a pelican beak, and usually I would pass it around, but I think it would be hard to do here. This is a pelican beak that weighs nothing. It's like a couple of paper clips or something. This is incredible, right? So you can have incredible range of size and shapes for different kinds of unique diets, unique lifestyles, and unique environments, right? And so this is a way to play and differentiate yourself without adding weight and ruining your equation. So that's something that we see on the surface, but we're going to go underneath the surface and look at what's happening underneath with the foundation of a bird. So you can see the beak is out. Oops, I got my pointer. Got the beak out here, sticking out of the feathers, and a little bit of the feet. But basically everything that's going on a bird is happening under the surface. So that's the intent of this talk, is to kind of dive in a little bit deeper. And since we already started with the beak, let's look at the skull first. Okay? So what's the first thing you notice about the skull? The eye. Look at that. Let's see my pointer. Look at that thing right there. The eye is huge, right? The eye on a bird is so big that the skull, the brain is pushed up on its side and shoved into a back corner like an afterthought. So does that mean that birds are dumb? No, because the eye actually processes a lot of information without needing to send it to the brain, okay? So imagine birds flying through a bunch of branches. Branches are coming at it super fast. It's like there's branches in front of it. The eyes look at it, sends a signal to the brain. Oh my gosh, there's some branches. What way do I go? And the brain thinks about it and says, let's go left. Sends the signal back to the eyes. Look for a path left. Bam, too late. You don't have time to process information like that. The eyes are participating and taking over a lot of that functioning of information so that the brain doesn't have to do that. So the brain might be smaller, but the information is happening in other places, okay? Okay, that's how big the eye is. Is that what we see? No, not at all. The eye is not that big. This is more like what we see, right? So now we know the eye is what? It's like, I don't know, this big or so, right? It's hard for me to see here. So what's going on? So birds have a unique bone called a sclerotic ring, which sits around the eye and holds the eye in place. And here it is with a side view of it. The bone sits on top of the eye with skin attached to it, and it's like a collar that holds the eye down and in place. And then a little bit of the eye gets to bulge up through the center of that collar. And let's see if I can back this up then. Oops, wrong way. That's what we see here. So the eye is this gigantic thing here, and then there's a ring right here, bony ring around that holding it in place, and then part of the eyeball bulges up through it, and that's what we see, okay? So what's unique about the sclerotic ring? Only one other group of animals have ever had it, and they were dinosaurs. Only dinosaurs and birds have sclerotic rings, and it's one of the main pieces of evidence that birds evolved from dinosaurs, okay? Pretty unique. No other animals have that. But that's not all that's going on with the eyes. Look where the eyes are located. They're on the side of the skull, a little bit forward to center. And because they're on each side of the eye, this is the scale of the vision. They're seeing this much with each eyeball. So one eye is looking out in the world seeing this much. The other eye is looking out over here and seeing this much, right? So they're looking out to the sides. What's the advantage of that? Looking for predators, okay? That's the advantage of having eyes off to the sides. What's the disadvantage? If you have one eye over here and one eye over here, you have no depth perception because you need your vision to overlap in order to have depth perception. So yes, you can see predators coming at you from all directions, which is fantastic, but you don't have depth perception. As opposed to like us, I mean, our eyes are looking forward. Our vision overlaps a significant amount, which gives us a lot of front-facing depth perception, which allows us to manipulate fine objects in space and do all the things we do with our hands and manipulating things in space, right? Also true for owls. Owls have forward-facing eyes that allow them to find mice in three-dimensional space. But the eyes of birds do overlap in front. So see how the span of vision spread out like this for each side? They cross right in front. So looking straight ahead, they do see in three-dimensional depth. Okay, they have depth perception looking straight ahead. And what's important is look where that starts. Right there at the tip of the bill, where the bill is reaching out in space and picking up little tiny insects, little tiny seeds. That is the point where depth perception starts for them, okay? And it'll be different for different birds that have different length bills. The eyes have to be calibrated for that. And if we look at, oops, oh, I think I did that. Look at this rock dove. Look where the eyes are pointing, right there. Starting right there, and from that point forward is where their depth perception starts, okay? But that's not the only thing you can notice about the skull. What else might occur to you?
No teeth.
Where are the teeth, right? You have this beak, which is basically a jaw. See, we think there'd be teeth right there that chew up things, right? Okay? What's the problem with teeth? They weigh a lot, and every aspect of a bird is designed around flight, reducing your weight so you can be a streamlined, lightweight flying machine. So what's the problem with teeth? Okay, teeth are heavy, so let's add in some teeth. Little teeth, top and bottom, so that it can grind food up and chew it, right? Okay? So, problem is, teeth are heavy. Okay, they're very dense material. What supports teeth? Heavy bones. What moves heavy bones? Heavy muscles, okay? And all of a sudden, because you've added teeth, you've added a lot of weight to the front end of the bird. And because it's an aerodynamic machine, it has to have a center of gravity, right, in the center, around which everything pivots. And if the head is heavy and is pulling down, how do you balance that out around the center of gravity? You add weight to the tail. And all of a sudden, you've added a lot of weight just to have teeth, okay? So what have birds done? They've gotten rid of their teeth, and they moved their chewing function to the center of gravity, where there's a special stomach called a gizzard, which is a heavy, muscular stomach. They pick up and swallow little tiny rocks. They put them in this very strong stomach, and then the muscles of the stomach go like this in different directions and crush up their food and serve as teeth to chew up the food items. Right here in the center of gravity. And if you look at a bird, it balances them out front to back. And here's a bird flying straight at you, and it's balancing it out side to side. It's right in the center, bounces it forwards and backs and side to side. It is the center point of weight on a bird, okay? But the absence of teeth is not the only thing that's unique about the beak, okay? So when you look at this, we have a maxilla, which is an outgrowth of the skull. It's a bone contiguous with the skull. And then we have the lower mandible, the dentary, which articulates, okay? And it moves separately. So I always thought that birds just kind of lowered their lower bill, kind of like this picture we looked at. It looks like that's what's happening, right? It's just dropping its lower bill. Kind of like we do. When we drop our lower jaw, our top jaw is part of our skull. It doesn't move, okay? We use that for grinding, chewing, pulling on food, and tearing food apart. Birds don't eat like that. They use their beaks like forceps, so they have a very different mechanism. And remember, the goal is to reduce weight. So we have the articulating lower mandible, the dentary. Okay, so they have a muscle here that pulls it down. And as it pulls down the dentary, the tip goes down, and the base pivots up around this pivot point, okay? And as the base pivots up, it moves another bone called a quadrat bone, which pivots around the base right here. So as this goes up like this, the quadrat goes up like this. And as the quadrat goes up like that, it pushes another bone, the jugal bone, forwards and then up. So as the lower jaw goes down, this kind of cog system lifts the upper mandible at the same time. And that's what creates this forceps motion. So even though this upper mandible, the maxilla, is contiguous with the skull, there's actually some cartilage here that's very flexible. And so if you find a fresh skull, you can take the upper mandible or the upper beak of a bird and lift it up and down. As it dries out and dies, it gets stiff. But when it's still fresh, the upper beak opens at the same, more like this picture here. That's what they're doing. The upper beak and the lower beak are opening at the same time because of this unique mechanism, all with one muscle. You don't need muscles on both sides, which would double the amount of muscles, opening your beak and closing it and stuff like that. You're not trying to chew and stuff like that. So they're reducing weight, moving it to the center of gravity, and then a different beak mechanism. Before we leave the head, just a couple other things. So first of all, remember the eye is this big thing here. And then they cover it with all these feathers. So 80% of the feathers on a bird are on its head. Isn't that incredible? And why is that? Where are they signaling all their social signals and stuff like that? They're ruffling up their feathers and lifting their crests or whatever they're doing. They're signaling emotion and social behavior with their face and all those feathers. It's one reason why there's feathers there. One other thing about the head I'll mention before we move on is the eye. So birds close their eyelids like we do. At night they go to sleep, they close their eyelids up and down. Or if they want to rest, they just close their eyes up and down. So imagine you're flying along. Oh, a piece of dust goes in your eye. Oh, shoot. What are you going to do? You can't go like this with your hand. You can't go like this, like that. So what do you do if you get dust in your eye? That's a big problem. So birds don't open and close their eyes as they're flying because they might fly into something. They need to keep their eyes open. So in addition to their eyelids that go up and down, they have a nictitating membrane. I guess you can't read that from that distance. Nictitating membrane, which is a transparent kind of membrane or window that goes back and forth, forwards and backwards, like a windshield wiper, that cleans and moistens the eyes as they fly, just like you're driving in a rainstorm, keeping the dust clean, free from their eyes all the time without having to open and close their eyes. Okay, let's look at the wings. A lot going on here. And the first thing I want to point out, if we look at the bones on the wings of a bird, here we have it next to a human arm, right? And what do you notice? Very similar. Basically all the same bones, the same proportions of bones, minus some variations. We have a shoulder here. We have an elbow here. We have a hand here. And look how the proportions are basically the same bones and everything. But there are some big differences, mostly in the hands and fingers. Okay, so think about our wrists and hands. We have so many bones, which allow us to do all kinds of dexterous maneuvering and manipulating of our world. Would that work for birds? No, it wouldn't work for birds. Imagine a bird flying along with our hand, Woo, this is really hard. I can't control this. And how would you control it? Muscles, right? More muscles to control this movement. So it's not efficient at all. So they've taken all of those wrist bones here and reduced it to 2 wrist bones. So rather than this, it's a very limited motion, very efficient. Very simple, very efficient. None of this fluidity, just a very simple repeated motion because it's just 2 bones. And then all the fingers. Look at all those extra finger bones. Well, if you're trying to reduce weight for flight, do you want to carry around all those bones? No. So you get it down to 1 finger. This is the index finger here. The entire half of a wing of a bird is that 1 finger, index finger. There's a tiny little vestige of a bone here, which is the middle finger. And then a little vestige of a bone here, which is what's left of the thumb. So basically, it's 1 finger. Forearm, wrist, 1 finger sticking out. And if we add some feathers, add some feathers to this, kind of get a sense now of what we're looking at. So we have the shoulder here. We have the elbow here. And basically, the skin on a bird and the feathers go like this. So we don't see the shoulder or the elbow. They're hidden inside against the body of the bird. What we see when we look at a bird is the forearm, the wrist, and then the hand. And the hand is primaries, 1 through 10, and the forearm is secondaries, 1 through 14, 15, something like that. Never 1 through 14 or 15. And if we draw a line from the wrist down through here, this is the dividing line. This is the hand out here on a bird. And then this is the forearm here, counting backwards. So that's all we see on a bird wing. It's just forearm and hand, okay? And the hand is the propeller on a bird for aerodynamic reasons. If you cut off a tiny bit of the tip of those feathers, just a fraction of an inch, a bird cannot fly. You can remove 40% of these feathers and a bird can still fly. As long as it has a propeller, you can take away a lot of its lift and it can still fly, but you cannot remove the propeller and have a bird still fly, right? So that is where that's all happening out here. And a few other things we can see about this. From the wrist right here to the shoulder is a tendon called a patagium right there that stretches from the shoulder to the wrist. So imagine a bird is flying. You're seeing this part, the forearm and the hand. From here on the wrist to the shoulder is a tendon on both sides. And they're like rubber bands. So as a bird's flying, it's constantly responding to the wind currents and pressure like this, and this stretchy tendon is letting them do these little micro adjustments. It's not rigid like this. It's a constant give and take. Does that make sense? And then on the trailing edge of the bones is a postpatagium right here. So right here is a thick fibrous tendon along the trailing edge. Its function is to hold all those flight feathers in place, to keep them flat and laid out, okay? And it's very firm, because that's super important, that all the feathers aren't pointing all these random directions. They need to be all laid out on a flat aerial surface so they can fly. And it's so important that on this bone here, the ulna, which is this bone here that the feathers are pushed against, there's holes in the bone. So here's an example of I don't know if you can see this even, I'll have it at the table up front. This is a pelican ulna, and there's holes running up the center of the bone. Each one of those is where a feather sits in that hole, running up the bone. You don't realize it until you see a bone this big, right? And that is help locking each of the feathers in place. And then the tendon makes sure they're flat. That makes sense? So the base of each feather goes into one of those holes. And then we have, I mentioned the little vestigial thumb. Let's see, is that everything for that one? Oops. Yeah, I guess that's everything. We have the little vestigial thumb. I won't go into this too much, but there's a little tiny thumb with a couple feathers attached to it. And they use that for fine-tuning flight. So when a bird is coming into land, it turns its wings up more towards the vertical. And the more you turn your wings up towards vertical, you get turbulence coming behind the wing. And turbulence destroys lift. So as soon as you go like this and you get turbulence, you just drop straight out of the sky. So they can lift this tiny little thumb with a couple feathers on it, and when they lift the thumb, it turns the turbulence into a laminar flow. So here, with a steep wing, there's turbulence behind it. You lift the thumb right here, and the air streams over the top of it and allows you to slow down without causing this drop out of the sky with no lift. Complicated, but I just want to mention that. So when we put all the pieces together, we get the shoulder in here, we get the elbow in here, we get the wrist in here. This is the division right here. So this is all hand. This is all forearm right here, okay? Is everyone doing okay? Just check in before I keep going. Okay.
So is that little feather at the top?
Here's the thumb. There's a little thumb here and a little thumb here. And they can control that like a little, when an airplane, when you're landing in the airport, you can see the little, whatever they're called, airfoils lift up. Exactly the same thing. And since we're talking about feathers, I'll just do a little aside on feathers because they're so cool. Every feather we see on a bird is a contour feather. It is streamlining the bird. It's the outer surface of the bird. And what distinguishes a contour feather is it has a central shaft and then veins on each side. The veins are made out of barbs, these little filaments that stick out in parallel to each other. There's about 9,000 filaments, barbs, on each side of the vein. And then those are attached by about 1 million little Velcro hooks, which we call barbules, okay? And by covering all the outside surfaces of the bird, they create a coat on the bird, right? It's covered in a streamlined, waterproof coat. So the bird is like flying around the world wearing a Gore-Tex coat. This is great. No, I'm not going to get wet or anything, okay? And then underneath that, they have a different kind of feather called a down feather. And the difference here is there's no central shaft. There's no barbules holding it together, so it's just a frilly mass with lots of air trapped in it. And that's like our sleeping bags, our down parkas, stuff like that. That's what keeps us warm. So basically, a bird is flying around in the world wearing a big warm down coat. Ah, I'm so warm, this feels great. It's wearing a Gore-Tex jacket over that. I'm waterproof, this is fantastic. I'm dry, I'm warm. Oops, what's the problem? No, not yet. We'll do that next. You get too hot. No. More important problem, you can't feel anything. You're wearing 2 amazing coats that are protecting you from all the outside forces. You can't feel anything. So they have a third kind of feather called a phyloplume, which is all shaft, and a little bit of barbs at the tip. You don't really even see the barbs. So basically just shaft sticking out of feathers all over the body, and these are antennae that tell it what's going on in the world around it. It's reading air currents and air pressure and where the placement of feathers are, and it's continuously feeding signals, letting the bird know where it is in the world, what's going on, and how it's navigating space. If you cut those phyloplumes, a bird cannot fly because it has no information from the outside world. And one more thing about feathers before we leave them. Like you said, feathers are hot, right? They do a great job, and they're heavy. They're actually too warm and too heavy. So you don't need all those feathers, and birds are actually really naked. So here's a diagram of this loggerhead shrike. All these white areas is bare skin, and then the stippled areas are where feathers are grouped together, and basically they're just doing comb-overs over all their nakedness, right? And that's a great way of reducing weight, because you don't carry all those extra feathers around. And all those feathers are controlled by muscles, and they have nerves going to them. So you got big areas where you don't have nerves or muscles, and you can group up your nerves and muscles and save weight that way as well. So you don't need all those feathers, so here's a way of dealing with that. Okay, back to bones. And we'll look at legs now. So some of you might know, yes, question?
You had mentioned how if they were missing like one of the first 10 feathers that they wouldn't be able to take off. Did they ever molt those feathers at all?
Yes, so did they molt the primary feathers? She's asking about primary feathers and missing them. I wasn't saying if they lose one of the feathers, if you cut the tips. Yeah, like you would do to keep it, what's it called when you cut when you dock a bird's wing so it can't fly. If you cut just a little bit of the tip, you'll destroy the propeller. But you can lose individual feathers up to a certain point and still fly, maybe not as well. You might be like a duck or a goose that drops all of them, and then you have to do a eclipse molt where you can't fly for a couple weeks. Yeah, great question. Yeah, question?
On the last slide, we had semi-plume on there as well.
Oh, I was right.
Or, I'm sorry, one more slide, sorry.
Yep.
Yeah. The semi-plume.
Yeah.
I guess you had mentioned the contours and then the spiral plume and the depth. I was just curious what that semi-plumes were.
Well, I didn't want to go into too much. I'm just going to focus on the three really important ones.
Yeah.
They just kind of fill in the spaces in between. They're halfway in between contour feathers and down feathers. Thank you for the question. Okay, so legs. So again, a lot of similarity with human legs, but there's a lot more differences here. So yes, there's some similarities, but the proportions are off, and there's a lot more differences in bones. So on a bird, the body is basically here, so we don't see the hip or the knee. All we're seeing is what's below that, which is the calf, the ankle or the heel, foot, and toes. So basically a bird is standing on its toes, okay? And let's see, so let's compare it to the human foot. So here's all our toes, lots of bones, 5 toes. Birds have simplified that quite a bit. And then the real big difference is what we do with our foot and ankle bones, okay? Lots of metatarsals, lots of tarsals, and birds don't need all of that, so they reduce it down to one bone, the tarsometatarsals, which is those bones fused to reduce weight, okay? And this is basically the foot on a bird, is a very long bone, which they use as a lever to throw themselves in the air and take off in flight. Just like throw themselves in the air and take off. So imagine if a human had a foot that was 2 or 3 times longer, how fast we could run or how high we could jump. That's exactly what a bird is doing with this bone that's been turned into a lever. And then as you move up the leg, we have a fibula and a tibia. So if you take your foot out and kind of move it in a circle in front of you, you're able to do that because you have 2 bones here, the fibula and the tibia. A bird doesn't need to do that, right? A bird is just basically, it's combine these into one bone, the tibia tarsus right here, which is the upper part, the calf, which is very simple, back and forth. So imagine a duck swimming in the water. All it's doing is this all day long, right? Very simple, very efficient. It's not jumping from side to side. It's not turning and doing all this kind of stuff, right? So imagine a rabbit being chased by a predator. What does a rabbit do? This is like leaping wildly from side to side to get away from the predator. A bird doesn't need to do that. If a predator comes at it, it throws itself in the air with this tarsometatarsals, opens its wings, and it's gone. Doesn't need to do any of this bouncing around. So it's simplified those bones to just one that just goes back and forth. Very simple, right? And then all the foot bones on a bird is now just one bone. See that tiny little dot right there? That's the last true foot bone on a bird, is that tiny little dot. And then we have the halix, which is the big toe, swiveled around so they have basically an opposable toe in the same way that we have an opposable thumb. And this is fantastic for perching on branches, right? The basic strategy is 3 toes forward, 1 toe back, which is perfect for grabbing onto branches. If you're a bird that's perching and gripping on the branches, then your hind toe is even with your front toes. If you're a ground bird that's running around, then that toe would get in the way, so it's up here like a chicken. Their halix is up here somewhere, out of the way. But basically, for most of the birds in the world, it's 3 toes forward, 1 toe back for gripping on the branches, okay? And look what else is going on here. There is a muscle coming from the knee. That muscle comes down the back of the calf, goes over the ankle, turns into a tendon, and then a tendon goes to the tip of each toe. And when a bird sits down on a branch, 3 toes forward, 1 toe back, and bends down, guess what happens to the tendon here as it sits down? It gets stretched, and because the tendon goes to the tip of each toe, it pulls the toes and it grips onto a branch, right? So at night, when a bird lands, all it has to do is land on a branch, 3 toes forward, 1 toe back, sit down, and the more it sits down, the more the tendon gets stretched, the tighter the toes go. It doesn't have to grab onto the branch and grip all night, hoping it doesn't fall off. It just sits down, and the more it sits down and falls asleep, the tighter that gets and the more it's gripped onto the branch. And another way that gets used, another example, is imagine an owl. So you have an owl up here on a branch looking down. There's a little mouse running along. The owl leaps into the air, and you see photographs of this all the time, right? The owl leaps in the air, its talons are spread wide open. It comes screaming down on the little mouse. Little mouse is running along, grabs the mouse, and what does it do? It collapses into the ground and lets the force of momentum pull the tendon, and the claws kill. Without having to squeeze with muscles and do all this, they just have the talons spread wide and then collapse into the ground, and that kills, just like that. So that's another way that gets used. I think that's it. And then we'll pull it all together here with the skeleton. Yes, please.
So about the tendon pulling the claws like that. So when we were on one of the pontoon trips, we saw osprey catching fish. And so they're kind of collapsing in the lake in a way. But then they're holding the fish up as they go. So are they like pulling their legs up, and is that what's holding them?
Yeah, that's great. So she's referring to how ospreys catch and they carry fish too. They would do the same thing. They pull their legs up. You see them, they'll migrate carrying fish and have a snack on the wing, which is incredible to watch. And the other thing that ospreys do too is they're having 3 toes forward, 1 toe back is called anisodactyl, is the name of that arrangement. They're facultatively anisodactyl, which means they can take a toe and flip it around. They can do 3 toes forward, 1 toe back when they're perched, and when they need to catch a fish, flip it around, and it's 2 toes forward, 2 toes back, which allows them to grab onto a fish and hold a fish. We couldn't do it with 3 toes forward, 1 toe back. The fish would just wiggle out. So, and then they would do something where they're not holding with muscles. They're doing something like this. Yeah, pulling it up and holding it tight on their body. Yeah, great observation. Yeah. Any other questions? I don't mind stopping and answering questions. So we're looking at the whole skeleton here. This is where all the magic happens, right? There is a lot of fusion going on in the skeleton. What's the goal? The goal is to reduce weight in order to fly more efficiently. And on a bird, everything from this point to this point is all the vertebrae are fused into a rigid platform, right? And so basically a bird has a very stiff back like this, perfectly straight and stiff. And then what do the wings do? Like this, very efficient, a strong, stable platform with their spine, and their wings just doing this motion like this, right? Very efficient. They're not doing this. So we do this, right? We can do all this stuff. So what lets us do this? We have strong back muscles. We have strong core muscles. So if a bird was going to do that, not only would it have to carry all that weight to keep control of this, but you'd be flying around like this. Whoa, this is really hard, right? So stiff back, simple, repeated wing beat like this. Very efficient. You're not wasting energy. You're not wasting weight. Okay? So you've got this amazing, stable platform here. What's the problem with that? So you don't have hands. How do you pick up food? Right? So they have offset that rigidity at their core with an extremely flexible neck. So all mammals have 7 neck vertebrae. Birds have anywhere from 11 to 25 neck vertebrae. So they have put all of their flexibility into their necks. And also birds can't move their eyes. You don't see birds looking back and forth with their eyes. They have to move their heads wherever they're looking. And they reach out to grab food and pick it up. And they reach over to preen their feathers. So all of that flexibility is happening in a very flexible neck with all these neck vertebrae offsetting the rigid platform. So then they're also flexible here at the tail. So this is all fused, but the last 4 vertebrae here are free, which lets them wiggle their tail. They can fan their tail out. They can turn it from side to side like a rudder when they're flying or swimming, right? They can fan their tail for courtship, whatever. There's a lot of flexibility in their tail. So basically, a rigid centerpiece, very flexible neck, and a little bit of flexibility in the tail for all this other stuff, okay? So what's going on there? Something else we can see on this skeleton. There are two times in a bird's life where it supports its weight. When is it supporting its weight? when it's standing, right? It's standing somewhere in the world. It's supporting its weight. So it needs a platform, a foundation to anchor muscles to. So they've taken 14 vertebrae and fused them with their hip bones to make this big, broad platform here. This is where their leg muscles attach, their tail muscles, and their abdominal muscles, all the muscles they need to engage when they're standing. And that's the platform that holds all those muscles and keeps them stable. What's the other time a bird supports its weight? When it's flying, right? A bird's hanging in the air, supporting its weight on its wings, okay? And all their flight muscles are attached to something called the sternum or the keel right here. And this is another platform to support their weight while they're floating in the air, flying in the air, right? Okay? And this sternum or this keel is so important that if humans were to fly, we would need a 6-foot keel to support the muscles we would need to fly. It's really an important muscle attachment point. And look how out of all the muscles that the bird is trying to reduce, these are 2 real big platforms because they're so important to the bird's life, okay? Let's see. Another really cool thing, the rib cage, okay? So when a bird is moving and flying in the world, it's facing all kinds of forces. It's fighting in the wind. It might be fighting other birds. And they don't have a really robust rib cage to protect their internal organs. They're being subjected to so many forces that are pushing them around. Do they have big, thick ribs? No, birds don't have big, thick ribs. They can't afford to carry that weight. Their ribs are actually like these thin straps or these thin ribbons. They're very fragile and very, very thin. So how do those thin ribs protect the internal organs from all the stresses of flight? Well, they have something called an uncinate process right here. And you can see it's a little flange sticking off of each rib. And essentially what's happening is each rib has its arm over its neighbor's shoulder. Together, they're doing a big group hug and creating basically like a lattice basket that is incredibly strong and also flexible that allows them to protect their internal organs without having to have big, thick, robust ribs. So really an amazing solution. The other thing they're doing with the ribs too is there's a hinge point. You can see it right here on each rib. There's a little hinge point. When a bird is flying, it needs an incredible amount of oxygen. And they actually have very small lungs, a fraction of the size of our lungs, yet they need an incredible amount of oxygen. So what they do when they're flying on each wing beat, their ribs kind of collapse and compress like bellows. You know those bellows you would use to keep a fire going? Pumping oxygen through their bodies. And their bones are part of their respiratory system too. They have hollow bones to help reduce weight. So as they're pumping oxygen, it's also circulating through their bones. And so the ribs are helping pump oxygen to keep this metabolic furnace going as a bird is flying, right? Okay, but the core of a bird, and we've got just a couple more slides, so hold on. The core of a bird really is what's called the pectoral girdle. So the humerus right here and right here is a very stout bone. It's the first bone of the wing. It's where the breast muscles attach. So the breast muscles, the flight muscles attach to the humerus, and from there to the sternum or the keel. And on every wing beat, there's an incredible amount of compression happening as the bird goes like this. 30% of a bird's weight is breast muscle. As you can imagine, it's the most important muscle for a bird to be able to fly and power flight all day long or chase prey or something like that. So 30% of its weight is these massive breast muscles. On every wing beat, they're pulling down with incredible compression. And because it's so much force on the body, there's 3 bones that come together, the scapula, which is the shoulder blade, the coracoid, and the clavicle. Right here, you can see them here too, which create a tripod to help distribute that weight so it doesn't, or the force, so it doesn't crush the bird. So that's really important, is the pectoral girdle for distributing that force. And a bird has incredible breast muscles, right, to pull down on wings. Okay, so in this right side, the humerus, it attaches from here to the sternum or the keel. These incredible breast muscles, whomp, whomp, whomp. Makes sense, right, for flying. Okay, that's great. What's the problem? How do you lift your wings? You're like, oh, I got this solved. Oh, I got this solved, right? Well, you need to do this. Do you have shoulder muscles or back muscles to do that with? No. So birds have come up with an ingenious solution, which is you have this massive breast muscle, and then underneath it is a thin sheet of muscle called the suprachiasmatic, right here. Just a thin sheet that comes up along this keel, goes up through, there's a little tiny canal here, or a little hole, where the three bones come together. It goes through that and attaches to the top. Here's another view of it here. So here we have the massive breast muscle pulling down. So this would contract and pull down. And then this thin sheet pulls down too, but because it goes up over the top, when it pulls down, it lifts the wing. But the weight is underneath the center of gravity, right? It's not on top throwing things off. It's just part of this heavy ballast underneath the bird. What's cool is you can cut this suprachiasmatic muscle and a bird can still fly, but it can't take off. So why is that? So when a bird is sitting on the ground and it needs to take off really quickly, say a predator jumps on it, it has to use muscles to throw open its wings, pull down, throw open its wings, and pull down. But then once a bird's in flight, it's just basically doing this, kind of bouncing along. And what they do when they're in flight, bouncing along is, let's see how to go back on this. When they're bouncing along, every time the wings come down with the breast muscle, here, the furcula, does anyone know what bone this is? Wishbone. So like at Thanksgiving or Christmas, when you have a chicken or a turkey, and people want to pull on the wishbone and break it, it's very flexible. And so on every wing beat down, as the wings come down, this is a paper clip, same idea. It gets pulled together, right? And it stores energy. And then as soon as you let go, it springs open and pops the wings up. So once a bird's flying, it's just doing this, and it's not using a muscle to lift its wings. It's just pulling down, compressing this bone, the furcula or the wishbone, storing the energy, and then when it relaxes the breast muscles, it pops the wings up and open. Right? They can fly but not take off if you cut that critical muscle. Okay, so let's see. We'll do one more slide here. Oh, let's see. Yeah, okay. So in conclusion, when we see birds, we're seeing all of these things going on all the time, but they're hidden by feathers. We can see the flexible tail. See that right there? There's a flexible tail. There's the keel right here. There's a gigantic eye right here. And then here's the division right here, the hand out here, the forearm. Look how they're two different colored feathers here, so you can really see the difference clearly. So all of the things we just talked about are going on under the surface. There's what making a bird. We just don't see it because it's covered up by feathers. And just to conclude, I want to just say that, birds have spent millions of years finding the perfect solution to flight, reducing weight, and they've done that by getting rid of bones, fusing bones, and coming up with all these amazing, ingenious solutions that are all happening out of sight, hidden underneath their feathers, and I hope this helped give you a glimpse of their world. So thank you. I guess questions? Any questions? Yeah, two questions. Go ahead.
Everybody has that little thumb.
Yes. So I think our boards have that. Yeah, the alula. Yeah. I'm thinking about like penguins, but yeah, probably.
So even this little parakeet.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah, all birds have that little vestigial thumb with it has 3 little feathers attached to it, and it's just a key part. I wish we had a specimen in here. Maybe we do, but yeah, you have a question too.
So, how long is the evolutionary trail that you have of bird bone muscle changes? I mean, so we see it right now.
Yeah.
But has it changed in 15,000 years or 30,000 years?
So, the question is how long have birds had this design? I think basically 15 million years.
It doesn't change.
No, it doesn't change. They can't. I mean, they modify beaks, stuff like that. They modify colors. They modify songs and behaviors. They're not tinkering with this design. You can't. What would you do with this? Yeah. I mean, and the great question is like, yeah, they might have come up with this design 15 million years ago, but what about the intermediate steps before that?
Yeah.
where you weren't flying. I mean, how did those things, they just pop out of thin air? I don't know, but yeah, question over here.
What's the use of the tongue?
The use of the tongue. The tongue, so what question is, what's the use of the tongue? I think the primary use of the tongue is it has a weird hook on it, so they can slide the tongue forward and then pull in. Because they don't have fingers to shove food in their mouth, and their beak is hard material, so they can't really they'd have to open their beak and let it slide down their gullet. But a tongue goes back and forth, and there's a weird kind of hook on it that must function to pull food in and down the gullet. Yeah.
The special feather that helps them know what's going on around, is it connected to the nervous system?
Yeah, so the question is about connection between feathers and nerves. Yes, they're all connected to nerves. You know, if you touch a bird, they can feel it, and yeah, their feathers are innervated. I mean, they're connected at the base. So the phyloplumes, which are the ones of the antenna, are definitely giving it signals. There's no reason to have them otherwise. They're feeding signals about information about the outside world. And yes, question?
Does bird have tasting buds?
Do they have tasting buds?
Yeah. Where are they?
Yes. Does anyone know the answer to that? They do taste. Do birds have taste buds?
They don't.
Yeah, they don't have taste buds.
They don't eat. They don't. Spicy foods. They don't
worry about spicy food. But there must be. So they have. Some have great senses of smells.
Definitely nice, fatty, salty, as sweet food.
They really.
Yes, just like human. And definitely has the preference. So I just wondered what she tastes.
So,
Yeah.
I actually have some expert knowledge on that.
Yes, thank you.
So there are birds that are nectar targeted. They have a sweet receptor. It's not at all related to our sweet receptor. Complete convergent evolution to nectar.
That's a great answer. So yeah, like hummingbirds are always tasting different nectar solutions and concentrations and judging which flowers to go to and stuff. So I guess that's taste.
Yeah.
In a way, yeah.
It's taste. It's not the way we do it.
Yes, question? Sorry.
Is there a relationship between the wing beats and breathing? Do the lungs exhale more completely with the downbeat? Such that there's more efficiency?
Well, the question is about the synchronization of wing beats and breathing. Yes, they're doing it on every breath.
Okay.
Yes. And if a bird's just sitting there on a branch, it's not really doing a lot. So it doesn't need to do deep breathing. But as soon as a bird is flying, they need to do deep breathing because flying is just an incredible energy burn. They need to burn a lot of oxygen. And what's the problem for a bird? What allows us to do deep breaths? Diaphragm, which is a big muscle. Can they afford to carry around a heavy diaphragm? No, they don't. So if you're just sitting on a branch, they don't need a diaphragm. Oh, I'm saying that right. Because they're just sitting there and they're just passively breathing easily. But as soon as they start exerting energy and flying around, they need a lot of energy. They don't have a diaphragm. So this collapsing of the rib cage on each wing beat is the bellows. It's serving as a diaphragm. And then, I mean, I didn't get into respiration, which is a huge topic, and it's so complicated because they have a four-way breathing system, and they have 9 sets of air sacs in their bodies, and they have hollow bones, and it's all part of this complex circulatory system. So I didn't want to get into that, but it's a big part of what's going on here. Sorry about that. Should we do a couple more questions? Yeah, go ahead.
What's the evolutionary point of having this really big eyeball and then covering most of it up?
Well, what's the point of having a big eyeball and then covering it up?
With a tiny little hole.
Yeah, the tiny hole. So why would you have a big eyeball? Big receptors. They are a visual creature. Their entire world is visual. They have to process an incredible amount of information really quickly. Their flicker rate, which is how much information their eye takes in, is way faster than ours, which means they're seeing the world in very fast motion. And making instantaneous decisions. So the eyeball's taking all of that in. That opening doesn't really matter. I mean, they're not going to see more because it's more of this versus this. It just focuses light coming in differently. So this.
It's not especially efficient at low light.
Well, that's more about.
I mean, it's like a cameraman.
No, but it's more about how many rods and cones you have. And bird eyes are extremely, we should do a whole talk on bird eyes. Jeez, it's an incredible topic, yeah. That's more about how many rods and cones you have for low light, I think.
But
Is that right?
if you're not exposing those rods and cones to the outside world, it's not going to be.
They are, the light is being, yeah, the lens is letting in light that spreads across the whole retina, and they're reading all that data very quickly.
Well, think about a cat, for example,
Yeah.
which has a lot of ability to see things at low light.
Yeah.
And it has the equivalent of a very large aperture on a lens.
Right.
Birds don't, apparently.
Okay, is this okay if we pursue this topic for a second? Okay, so, okay. Let me address that a little bit. So, the idea is cats, okay, you probably have a different answer, but let me answer it in a different way. Here's something really cool. So, cats have bigger eyes, they're letting in more information, low light and stuff like that. When did mammals evolve? During the time of dinosaurs. The very first mammals were little tiny furtive things that came out at night and ran around at night to avoid being stomped on by dinosaurs or get eaten by dinosaurs. So when mammals evolved as an offshoot of life, they became nocturnal. And before that, they could see 4 colors, but because they became nocturnal, they lost the ability to see 2 colors. So mammals see 2 colors. And then a subset of mammals, which are primates, moved into the diurnal world and moved up into trees and started eating color fruits. So primates developed so they could see 3 colors, and we see 3 colors a day. Most mammals, if not all mammals now, other than primates, see 2 colors. So yes, cats might have bigger eyes and see more color, but they're seeing less. They're seeing less of the color spectrum and stuff like that. Whereas birds see 4 colors. So that's a longer answer. Yeah, question?
Okay, so I wanted to bring forward the idea of the protection of the eye by making it smaller but still efficient.
Yep.
I mean, I think that has to be a factor.
I usually use that in the talk. So if you got this gigantic eyeball sitting out here and you fly into a branch, what's going to happen to your eyeballs? Probably pop out. So I think that collar sitting on it, held in place with skin, holds it down so this gigantic eyeball doesn't just fall out every time you fly into something. I like that. I use that in all my talks. I didn't say it today though.
Most of these birds are not nocturnal. Most of them are not.
Mostly are not nocturnal, yeah, except a
So
few.
they don't need a light sensitive.
No. Except for seeing color, yeah. Question?
Is the position of the eye in a bird, is that shifted for birds of prey? Or is it still very much
So,
side?
question is the position of eyes in different groups of birds. It's going to be calibrated for what kind of lifestyle they have and the length of the beak too, because they want that to be where the depth perception starts. You're asking about birds of prey. Red-tailed hawks. Yeah, most of them have eyes that are more forward-looking. Not entirely, depends. So it's many, there should be a whole book on this topic of skulls and where eyes are in relation to beaks and stuff like that. But it's different for all the birds of the world in some small way. But in general, I think a lot of birds of prey, their eyes are more forward because they're looking for prey and they need to be able to see in 3-dimensional space to catch things. Yeah, question?
Have I seen one? Are they easy to see?
Okay, so great question. So question is about the phyloplume. Has anyone ever seen a phyloplume before? What the heck is a phyloplume? So as part of this talk, I used to do like a weekend class where we would do bird dissections. And we would look at and talk about all these things as we went through the presentation. And so we would look for phyloplumes. These were pigeons, laboratory pigeons who were dissecting. And we might find one, if we were lucky, with an entire classroom like this, everyone working on specimens and stuff like that. They're so fine, so hard to see, and when it's a wet specimen, whatever barbs there are, you just don't find them at all. They're incredibly hard. The finest hair you could imagine is what they look like. Yeah.
It's birds like the nightjars, if they're nocturnal, have much smaller sclerotic rings.
Do nightjars or nightbirds have smaller sclerotic rings? No, bigger maybe, because their eyes are, bigger, yeah. I think bigger, yeah. Because whatever eye you see sticking out is surrounded by the sclerotic ring. So, Yeah, so I think that I don't want to keep you up too long. So let's go ahead and wrap this up, and you can ask me questions. I'll be here. I have, remember these. You probably want to look at these, the holes right here, the super lightweight pelican that you can't even feel. And please sign up for my newsletter. That's how I stay in touch with people. I love to share stories of the natural world. And every week I write 2 different newsletters. One is based on North Central Washington, if you're in this part of the world. What's happening in the natural world this week? Week after week, it's been going for years. It's incredible to follow the changing seasons with amazing pictures and stuff. And the other one is the national one, the Lukas Guides, which is a deep dive into different topics. And if you sign up for the newsletter tonight, I'm giving away free copies of my book. Oh, I didn't even mention these, but just explain these. So I have free copies of this book if you sign up for the newsletter. This is a book I did for Lonely Planet, which is a guide to the top 200 wildlife spectacles in the world, arranged week by week for the best time to go see them. So it's an incredible fantasy travel book and great for kids. It's fun to go through this book with kids. And so I'm giving away a copy of it if you sign up for the newsletter tonight. I have a bird book for the Sierra Nevada if you're interested. And then another book on language. I spent 4 years studying the pieces and processes that go into shaping English words. And I wrote a handbook on how to create your own words for speaking of the natural world and why and how to create new words. Just a quirky side passion of many things I do, along with all the other 50 books I've worked on. So please sign up for the newsletter and follow along. I love to stay in touch with people. Reach out anytime. My information's there. I have my cards. Ask questions. Say hi to me. Come visit. Whatever. I mean, I'd love to talk with everyone. So, yeah. But it's over here too. I have my whatchamacallit. I don't know how to do this, but yeah. They're online. They're on the website. The advantage of getting it, signing up as a newsletter, as an email, is it comes to you. You don't have to remember to look for it. It just comes. You can ignore it or read it or whatever. Thank you, everyone.